Equipment is the most important thing in min-maxing a build, as it can take a simple squishy build into having 500 HP with 50% resistances. However, there is hundreds of equipment items in Deepwoken, so what is actually worth running? We'll first start by going over the equipment that gives you the best possible stats, then we'll move on to the alternate pieces that don't give you as good of stats, but give you some really good utility, or are just more specific to certain builds or playstyles. Then we'll get into how to distribute the pips on your equipment and optimize it for the most possible defense, which will include me telling you how to calculate the stats. And then finally, we're going to get onto how to obtain armor's needles, as these are required to actually make these god roll pieces. I'll be going over multiple solo and team methods. So if you enjoyed today's video and want to see more, make sure you like and subscribe and join the Discord for some PvE builds. A huge thank you to my channel members, especially those kind souls on the Mega and Super tiers. They get these videos early along with other channel member perks. Moving on to the optimal stats, I'll cover the best pieces of gear for HP as well as Ether, since Ether is the other kit that you sometimes will want to run. For the head, we'll start with the Christmas hat. This is obtained for Etheron during Christmas, giving you 10 HP and 1 posture innately. On top of this, it gives you 2 legendary and 2 rare pips. Let me quickly explain how equipment stars work. At 3-star, your equipment will gain 2 rare and 1 legendary pip, with the head, arms, and boots equipment all gaining a little bit of HP as well. Alternatively, Silver Knight's helm is an actually obtainable version of the Christmas hat. It does have 1 less posture and slightly worse pips, but you still get that innate 10 HP. In total, it has 1 legendary, 3 rare, and 1 uncommon pip. The Silver Knight's helm is obtained through many bosses like Enmity, Chaser, or Primadon. However, if you are making a set around physical, then an Aegis of Enmity is actually better. While it only gives you 5 innate HP, you get 3 legendary and 2 rare pips. If you couldn't tell, this helmet is obtained from Enmity. And then if you want to make an Ether set, then the Tillion's Barrette is the best, giving you 10 Ether, 2 legendary, and 4 rare pips. It's obtained from the Carnival of Hearts. For arms, you'll be using a Bastions of Enmity at 10 innate HP and 2 posture, as well as giving you 4 legendary and 2 rare pips. If you couldn't tell, this is obtained from Enmity. However, if you are making a PvE build, then you'll want to be using the Pathfinder Elite. This is dropped from Squivos or Wave 50 of the Diluvian. It gives you 4 legendary and 4 rare pips. So why do we use a Pathfinder Elite specifically for PvE? Well, it's because of the 5% innate DVM it has. When they removed the DVM pips, very few items remained that could actually give you some of this stat. And while I'm discussing PvE arms equipment, I want to debunk something that I see a lot of people trying to run, and that's the Warlock's Mantle. Because most people don't know, but Overflowing Dam actually scales down with your intelligence. So at an investment of 5 intelligence, which is what is required for Warlock's Mantle, you'll only be getting a 5.625% damage buff. But I'll be very generous and assume that you're getting the full 10% from Overflowing Dam. What most people don't consider is the soft damage cap. If you don't know, above 150% in PvE, all multipliers are half as effective. So what would normally be 10% goes to 5% to your M1s when you have full Ether. So between Warlock's Mantle and Pathfinder Elite, you're either choosing 5% to your M1s usually, or 5% to everything all the time. Therefore, Pathfinder Elite is just better. It was the biggest oversight in the PvE community, myself included, for actually peddling this item. There is many ties for the boots, however the Abyss Wanderer boots are the easiest ones to obtain from the Ceramid Hollow. They give you 2 legendary, 4 rare, and 5 innate HP. They're also the best option to the Ether. For the torso, you have the Fold of Enmity, which outclasses everything by a mile in terms of stats, at 3 legendary and 3 rare pips. It's also the best for Ether. If you couldn't tell by the name, this is also obtained from Enmity. For the face equipment, you'll be using the Citadel frames with 5 innate HP. Sadly, with face and torso equipment, 2-star is the max you can obtain, so you'll only be able to get 3 rare pips on this item. The Citadel frames are obtained from most bosses like the Heart of Enmity, Primadon, or Layer 2. However, if you do want to go Ether, then the Hive Lord mask from the Minmax is slightly better because it has 4 rare pips. The earrings is a tie between the Dark Pearls at 2 rare pips and the Moonlit earrings at 4 rare pips. The Dark Pearls can be obtained from the Black Market for 20 crowns, and the Moonlit earrings are obtained from most bosses, like Layer 2, Ferryman, and Primadon. For rings, because we're talking about the best possible stats, that would be 2 Moon and 2 Waning Ring. You'll have to do the double ring glitch to actually equip 2 of each. So I thought it was a good idea to actually show you guys the ring glitch. Basically, I have 4 rings on, including 2 dummy rings that I don't actually want, so the Congers and Finishers, and I'll want to equip 2 Ishin rings. Side note, only the stats stack on the rings, so like the 3 HP from Rosen's, and not the actual bonuses from the rings themselves. So I'll grab 1 ring, try to equip it, sit at the campfire, and unequip one of the dummy rings, so the Conger's Clutch. Then I'll equip the other ring, and then I will try to replace Finisher's ring, leading to me having 2 Ishins on. Remember, the positive bonuses from the rings don't stack, only the stats do. Because of their pips, you can get +9 on each, leading to +36 HP. Both of these rings can easily be obtained from Ferryman and are also the best for Ether. So using a full set of the most optimal gear you can obtain, you'll be getting 11 legendary and 34 rare pips. However, keep in mind that not all of these pips can be allocated to HP, Fizz, or Ether. Not to mention, the best stats aren't always the most optimal equipment. So let's go over some alternatives. There are many, by the way, as Deepwoken has lots and lots of equipment, but I'm just going to be going over the main meta alternatives, because usually if a build requires a certain bit of equipment, it tends to be specified. For the head equipment, we originally had a Silver Knight's helm that requires 10 Fortitude, but the Parasol Planter is a good alternative at 1 legendary, 5 rare, and 2 and 8 HP. You always use this if you're using Flame Within and don't have Rush Hour, because it also reduces bleed damage as well as Flame Within, thanks to the Gross Resilience talent, which reduces damage over time effects and is extremely powerful. The Parasol Planter is obtained from Parasol commonly. However, if you're using Rush Hour, then the Deep Scorn Cask is actually even better, at 2 legendary and 3 rare pips, as well as 5 and 8 HP. Its talent, Already Dead, reduces self-damage from Rush Hour and Shade Devour. It is a must-have with these mantras as it's extremely powerful. This item is obtained from the Deep Spindle event. You can easily find one by server hopping at Trial of 1 or by doing Hell Mode. However, specifically for PvE, Underdog is absolutely insane, and the Deep Owl Chapiu gives it for free. You initially get 10% more damage to targets larger than you. However, on top of this, you also get between 2 and 4% extra damage to those with higher HP, just depending on your willpower. This item has 2 legendary and 3 rare pips, as well as 5 shatter armor. This equipment is commonly dropped from Deep Owls or Layer 2. There is no arms variants, we've already discussed all of those. But for the boots, you have Celestial boots at 2 legendary and 4 rare pips. The reason you use this equipment is for the Cosmic Connection talent, which buffs your Astral from 20% to 25% stronger. The only real downside to this piece of equipment is it can't be enchanted. Oh, and it is kind of expensive, requiring 1 Star Boots and 2 Astral Enchant Stones. However, you can get Star Boots rarely from Elder Primadon, and you can watch my old Astral guide to farm Astral Enchant Stones, since it's still 95% accurate. Alternatively, you can just buy Astral Enchant Stones from the Black Market if you're lucky enough to catch a deal. Now, Torso, this actually has quite a lot of things. We have the Whistling Period at 2 rare pips, 1 and 8 HP, and 8% wind armor. If you deal a certain amount of damage ticks to a target, you will get an auto parry shield that will parry the next attack, meaning that you can M1 through something on occasion. This is super good in PvE, as you can basically just get an extra hit on bosses. And in PvP, that extra hit can sometimes be deciding a fight. The downside to the shield, apart from the cooldown, is it disappears if you cast a mantra, so it's not as viable on mage builds. Next we have the Tyrann's Pendant at 1 legendary and 2 rare pips. This just cancels all fall damage. It does have a durability cap on how much fall damage you can negate, but it just goes on cooldown once it's exceeded. This item is absolutely insane for ganks since you can jump off really high cliffs, and if your opponent doesn't have a full damage cancel or a Tyrann's Pendant, then they're gonna take a lot of damage or just not be able to follow you. It's also good for mages in PvE since it allows you to maintain Perfect Flash's 25% damage buff. The Tyrann's Pendant is easily obtained from Elder Primadon and slightly rarer from normal Prima. Then we have what is the rarest piece of equipment in this video, the Mantle of Enmity, giving you 3 rare pips. What it does is it replaces your aerial attack with a new custom one. It's extremely strong for mix-ups and ganks, however it isn't that good in PvE. To obtain it, it's a 1% or less chance from Enmity, or if you were lucky enough, you could have abused a bug with Hallowtide. For the face, we have the Thrall of Enmity at 3 rare pips. This piece of equipment is really good because it gives you free access to the Lose Your Mind talent, which is normally a 60 cost thing. What Lose Your Mind does is as your sanity increases, so too will your damage output, all the way up to 15% extra damage. Extremely powerful if you're using something like Blind Seer, where you'll passively go insane from Sightless Beam. You get the Thrall of Enmity from Enmity. There isn't any variants for the ears, but rings has a lot. The first is all of the scaling rings. You have the Akira's, Dawnfist, Maestro, Prophets, and Rosens, all giving you 1 legendary and 2 rare pips. The unique thing about all of them is you gain 1.2 weapon scaling depending on which stat the ring has allocated to it. Akira's is willpower, Dawnfist is strength, Maestro's is agility, Prophets is charisma, and Rosen's is intelligence. These are just good if you want to squeeze just that little bit more M1 damage out on a build. You get all of them from Ferryman. Next you have an Ishin's at 2 rare pips. You want to use an Ishin's ring if you're confident that you can output more damage than you take, because it buffs your damage by 15% but makes you take 20% more. An Ishin's ring is very common in a lot of boss loot pools as well as layer 1. A Ring of Casters with 2 rare pips will buff your mantra damage by 5% while reducing your M1 damage by 5%. You use this on mages obviously. Ring of Casters can be obtained in layer 1, Primadon, or Doom. And then if you're going to be in the depths, then you want to use the Diver's Ring at 2 rare and 1 uncommon pip. This is one of the only ways to gain DVM, as you gain 5% anywhere in the depths, which is indicated by a blue health bar. So for a PvE player, this ring is a must-have for even more damage. The final singular item on this list is the Conga's Clutch Ring at 2 rare pips. When equipped, you slide even further, and have a much lower cooldown on sliding as well. It's good for general mobility if you just have a spare ring slot. You can obtain this in pretty much every basic loot pool, including layer 1 of the depths. I will give a special mention to the Shock Trooper Specialist set, as it's good for PvP and some PvEs. It does have very specific requirements, so not every build can run it, but if you can, this is definitely a meta set. And that's every major item on the list. Obviously, you change it up a little depending on the build. The other 100 or so items just aren't used very commonly or just aren't very good. However, I've been mentioning pips throughout this entire video, so I think it's about time that I get onto how to actually use the pips. I'll be breaking down this chart found on the wiki. The first thing that I can do is break it down into 3 pseudo types of pips. Head/arms, which allow you to get physical and HP, boots and rings, which are locked to pure HP, and everything else, which is just locked to ether. For max defense, you want to focus on upping your physical resistance and then your HP. While you can make a set that has elemental armor, realistically in PvE most things are physical, and in PvP you're going to come across more silent hearts than pure mages. But feel free to change around the pips to whatever you like. So the first step in making a god kit is to allocate the head and arms equipments to physical pips, starting with the legendary ones. You want to stop changing up the pips once you get to 50 physical armor. Make sure you have padded and steel scales as they give you 3% more. What's also important to note is that you can't have all of the pips on one attribute at a 3-star item, so the last pip will always be HP, as well as any spare pips. For the boots and rings, you just do all HP pips, with the 1 legendary pip on the boots being set to an anchor pip, as anchor gives you 10% knockback resistance, 0% 0.5 posture, and 3 HP. The rest of the equipment will just be all ether. Since you can't roll HP on these stats, then ether is just your next best bet, unless you really need sanity or something. However, to make one of these god kits, you will need armorers or gilded needles. And I have 4 easy methods to do these, each of them getting faster and faster as you go on, some of them being solo and some of them being team. Keep in mind that the better base kit that you have to start with, the less gilded needles you'll actually need. The first method is by doing wave 50. While wave 25 is better for Moonside Tomes and Sinner's Ashes that can be traded for gildeds, wave 50 gives you a far more even and higher amount of Smith's Alloys and Armorer's Needles. If you didn't know, you can actually craft 5 Smith's Alloys into 1 Armorer's. It's kinda slow, but wave 50 of the Diluvian is completely solo and is fairly easy to do if you know what you're doing, or just have a really good build. Enmity is the next method. It's notably faster than the Diluvian, however requires you to have a full team. The good thing about that is that there is many carry discords. It's notably faster and more profitable than the Diluvian, but it is a higher risk because of depth gankers, and you can't do it on demand like the Diluvian. Titus is the final solo method. He is really fast if you know what you're doing, and gives you an incredible variety of relics. Keep in mind, you can trade a lot of Titus's drops or gilded needles. Titus is a very hard boss, but extremely rewarding to learn. And the best method for Armorer's Needles is Elder Premodon by far. While he does cost 3 Sinner's Ashes to spawn, and there's a high chance you'll get snaked sadly, he does give an insane amount of relics. I managed to get 15 gildeds per Elder, which means I only need to do the boss 2 to 3 times to get a full god kit from scratch. And that's everything you need to know about equipment in Deepwoken. What to use, how to spec it for maximum stats, and how to grind the items to make one in no time. By using the information in this video, you can make your builds way stronger. If you enjoyed, remember to like and subscribe, and join the Discord for some PvE builds. A huge thank you to my channel members, especially those kind souls in the Mega and Super tiers. They get these videos early along with other channel member perks. Check out some more PvE content, and I'll see you all next time.